thank you very much. I hope you've been having a lovely time. And that you will continue to have a lovely time. I can almost guarantee that for the next 3/4 of an hour. I think just to warn you, there might be some audience participation. They're going to ask for hands up and all sorts of jargon. So I'm just warning you now so that you can gird your loins in case you thought you could just sort of slump gently, yeah? I'm going to hand over to this gorgeous panel, and we're going to, yes, there might be a bit more, there might be a bit more involvement along the way, and there will be time for questions at the end. And I happen to know that both Georgie and Kate will be in the bookshop at 4 o'clock signing books. So just to tell you now, because we've had runs on books and things haven't been there when people have got there. So just to let you know, I'll hand you over right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Wow, it's lovely to see everybody. My name's Nigel Cox, and I'm going to have to try and keep some order here, I think. I'll probably join in with the chaos if we have some. But the whole point of this one is we're going to have a bit of a discussion about various things, and which you'll find out as we go on. Some of you will already have met Sally Morgan. Sally is an organic gardener. She's a botanist, ecologist, and I think I'm not going to spend a lot of time on telling everybody about everybody, but Georgie, you've seen her several times already today, being very floriferous. And it's great to have Kate Bradbury on the stage. Many of you will have her books. Fantastic. Fantastic books. Sorry, I'm trying to look around at the same time as talking. She's an award-winning writer, so I'll spend a little bit of time talking about Kate. She really is a specialist in wildlife gardening and author of a whole load of books, some of which you can get in the bookshop afterwards. And 4 books. That means quadruple commission from me? Yes. And she's a patron of a couple of charities as well, and you've seen her on television, and she's been involved in Spring Watch and Autumn Watch and many other things. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? We've got a rather long title. Are we bogged down with jargon around climate and sustainability? And then how can we demystify planet-friendly gardening and make it accessible for everyone? So I want you to think about that very carefully, because I'm going to first ask each of the panel, including me, for a word that they think is jargon within our horticultural world. And I'm going to start with you, Georgie, at that end.
Well, I thought I'd talk about polyculture, which anything with something culture on it sounds like it's a thing that you might be rotting in a jar. And what on earth is polyculture? It sounds complicated and difficult, but the chances are that all of you who have gardens are growing in a polyculture already. It just means that you've got lots of different plants growing in an area rather than growing lots and lots of the same thing. And the reason one is encouraged not to have too much of a polyculture, so an example of a really good monoculture, an example of a really good monoculture is a lawn, for example. If you keep your lawn really mown and really tidy, then it's a monoculture of one grass, and there's not much room for anything else to come along and provide food or forage or habitat for anybody. Whereas if you don't mow your grass so much, if you leave your grass, you're a great leaver of your grass, Kate. So if you leave your grass a bit longer, even if you just don't mow it for like a fortnight or even give yourself 3 weeks, you may find that actually you're growing a polyculture, and you might have white clover and bird's foot trefoil and a bugle and all sorts of people who pop up in your grass, and they're there anyway, they're just under the surface, and all of a sudden you can pat yourself on the back and you can introduce it to your friends when they visit. You can say, this is my polyculture lawn, and sound like you're really very grand and important.
So Georgie, I mean, in a sense, you know, we're giving something a name which we actually already do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing with a lot of anything that needs debunking has been made more complicated by somebody who wants us to think that they're possibly clever or cleverer than they might, I don't know. But if there is a complicated word, then it usually comes from a simple premise. And so polyculture is probably what you're already doing, unless you're growing great big field of one kind of wheat and killing off all the other varieties of plants that would grow in that. You are growing a polyculture, so well done, everybody.
And they're
We're all
not
doing well
monoculture
already.
here at Yo Valley Organic Gardens or Yo Valley at all, are they?
No, then.
Definitely not. So, Kate, what's your word?
Hiya. My word is biodiversity.
Biodiversity.
I don't even know what it means.
No.
No, I'll do it, so which is the diversity, which is the number of types of bios, which is life. So it's basically biodiversity is the variety of life. And in a garden context, that's the variety of life in your garden. And so as a wildlife gardener, what I do is I create lots of habitats in my garden to promote biodiversity. And a really simple way of looking at that is if you take lavender, for example. Lavender's a really good bee plant, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Actually, if you actually sit there and sit in front of a lavender for a couple of hours, you'll probably only find 3 or 4 species of bumblebee using it, maybe a honeybee, maybe a couple of white butterflies. If you go salvias or something like bird's foot trefoil or viper's bugloss, you'll get 20 different species of bee, more solitary bees, more butterflies using it, because those plants, certain plants attract more species than others. So in small gardens particularly, which is another thing I sort of specialise in because I have a very small garden, knowing the number of species that will come to certain plants, knowing that some plants are better than others, enables you to max out your biodiversity. And then creating other habitats like log piles and leaf piles and compost heaps and all those things.
It's probably also something which we do naturally anyway, is it?
Again, yeah, most people are just doing it anyway. But, it's one of these words that we. I mean, it is a useful word. Biodiversity is a useful word. I struggle with the idea of measuring it in sort of fiscal terms, which governments try to do. But I think in our gardens, it's actually really important to have them as biodiverse as possible, because why would you not want more life over less life?
But so we don't necessarily have to label it with a word. We can label it with doing what we actually do, I guess.
Maybe. I think it can be quite a useful word. Okay.
So this is a jargon word which can be useful.
Yes.
So we're not. So I think that there's the question. We almost started by thinking. Well, I almost started thinking maybe suggesting that all jargon's bad, but it isn't necessarily, is it?
No, I don't think so. No, I mean, I don't think jargon. I think. Okay. It's just what it is. We have to rename things sometimes. It's just language, Nigel. Language evolves.
The thing about language is if we have words that we can use to describe things, the more words we have to be able to describe things, the easier it is for us to be able to relate to other people and communicate what we're trying to say. So a word like biodiversity is a really, really useful word. And actually, the awful thing is, polyculture is also really useful because it means you can say a lot of things in one word, but it's not useful when people don't understand what it is. So long as you can explain, now all the people in the room can describe their garden as a polyculture in one word, which is quite handy.
Now, this is an audience warning moment. We're going to ask you to participate in 1 minute, because I want you to think about a jargon word in horticulture that you might want us to talk about. But before we do that, I'm giving you advance warning. I wasn't intending to, but I am. Sally, what's your jargon word?
It's my favourite word, which is organic, and I often feel that this word is hijacked, greenwashed. But
That's another jargon word.
So I just want to explain what I understand by organic and what I'm sure Yo Valley does as well, because it's not just not using pesticides and chemicals in the garden. It is so much more. It is all about the soil and soil health and growing healthy plants. It's about having lots of natural predators that are going to control those pests in the garden. And it doesn't happen quickly. So I get to talk to so many people and they say, oh, it didn't work for me, because they didn't leave it long enough. And I know Sarah was saying the other day that it was 7 or 8 years before cycles really start establishing yourself in the garden. It's a slow process, but so important. And it is, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say it's organic September. It's so important for you to support.
It's certainly Organic September here. Look, we're in the lovely Yeo Valley Organic Garden.
And when I go round and I look at producers and what they do and how they produce their food, I can understand why I'm paying more. And I'm just going to say, please drink organic coffee, because I have seen some horrific examples of conventional coffee in South America and Central America. Please drink organic coffee. I've never seen so much biodiversity on an organic coffee
and polyculture as well. So we've actually got three things all combined together here.
So
we've got
my bandwagon is organic.
Polycultural diversity.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay, we're going to just take three. So you're going to have to shout out this. Who wants to shout out the first jargon word? There. Rewilding. Okay.
That's a jargon word that is so no one understands it, and everyone's got their own version of what it is.
And people get confused between rewilding and regenerative, don't they?
Yeah.
As well.
And renaturing. So it's another one that's just come out recently, a new one.
It's certainly not about letting all the brambles grow again, isn't it? I mean, you see somewhere like Nep and
I mean, the thing about Nep is is everyone familiar with Nep? It's this amazing rewilding site. It's this site of Nep Castle in Horsham in Sussex. And what they've done is they've got 300 acres of land and they've rewilded it and they've basically just given it back to nature. But they haven't just let everything grow because they've brought back mimics of the ancient animals that used to roam the land and manage the land. So instead of aurochs, which was a type of cow that we made extinct in the 1600s, they've brought back longhorned cows, which are very similar, and they live wild. They don't have any shelter or anything like that. They're not fed. They eat acorns and all the grass and things like that, and they live wild. They are wild range animals. Instead of wild boar, they've got Tamworth pigs. Instead of ancient, I can't remember what the ancient horses were called, but they've got
Exmoor ponies.
Yeah, they've got Exmoor ponies, and obviously they've got deer, and those species manage the land. So it's not just a case of just letting everything go, which is what a lot of people think it is. It's carefully managed. And so in a garden setting, rewilding is actually us gardeners taking on the role of those land managers, those wild land managers. So, instead of pruning or cutting back, suddenly we find ourselves grazing and rootling. And I find it quite an interesting way to sort of do your gardening now, because I basically just see myself as a giant cow.
I am definitely a giant cow. That's exactly what I was going to say. In my garden, so we planted a lot of trees. It's a 7-acre plot between Bruton and Wincanton, and we planted a whole border of trees all the way around the place, and they've grown and grown, and we've been there for 20 years, so the trees have grown and grown and grown, and now they're a bit crowded. So I am the wild auroch going around soaring off so that I can walk underneath them as a wild auroch would be able to do. And we do have a deer fence on account of I'm a flower farmer, and it would be a shame if the deer got in and ate all the roses. So I have to be the deer too. In that environment. So we're just big, hairy animals.
It's really fun.
I tell you one thing, rewilding is not just an excuse to let all the weeds grow, okay? Who's got another one? Permaculture. Oh, joy. Permaculture, yes. Well, I've got a permaculture community project, and we had this discussion, didn't we, Georgie, just before we came on? Permaculture, polyculture, putting these names with culture. I mean, permaculture is just what nature always used to do before the Industrial Revolution came along to a certain extent, isn't it?
Yeah, but surely if we as gardeners, so I have and a lot of you will have, permanently planted shrubs, trees, perennials, and from time to time you might dig up the perennials and split them and move them around a bit, put them in a sunnier place because they work. But basically, we're not. I don't really understand what permaculture means. But if I've got a garden that is planted and I'm not massively disturbing the soil and I'm not ploughing it every winter and not leaving it open to the elements to be degraded by a lot of rain and washed away and so on, do I then have a permaculture garden?
Well, I mean, there are a set of principles of permaculture which were espoused in the 70s by a couple of far-sighted people. But I think that the point is using the word in the wrong way very often. It's applying it to something and labelling it, just thinking, oh, that sounds great. I do this. I do permaculture, and all they're doing is just what is happening at Yo Valley Organic Garden, for example, just doing things organically. And so there's all these crossovers. I'm conscious that you're sitting over there and I'm looking the other way. So, Sally, your input on that one.
I think permaculture is quite interesting because of the zoning. Having done one of the courses, that they zone, so the areas that you go to the most are nearest to the house or the entry to the point, and then you have zones 2 and 3, and you're further afield, and it's got less management, and it's a little bit wilder. But I think there's such a lot to learn in permaculture because you can go on courses that take weeks and weeks and qualifications. So it isn't just about following nature's lead and doing a few things like that. It's really understanding how the systems work together and how the plants work together and how they enhance each other.
And you can use some of the principles like layers, you know, in terms of, you've got a small garden and you want to think about how you can maximise your use of that. You use every part of it. You use under the ground, you use on the ground, you use up the ground, you use climbing up the ground. So you're using every part of that space. And that's a sort of one of the fundamental principles, along with zoning. So it's another word which perhaps has been hijacked somewhere. I think that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about these words not meaning something, but sometimes they're used in the wrong context. We've got one more jargon word. Who's got another jargon word? Well, if you haven't, I'm going to give you one. Greenwashing. We'll have fun with that one, won't we? Have I got to do it?
You're going to answer that one.
Greenwashing. What is greenwashing? It's making people believe that something is environmentally sound just because, I know, it just they can get a commercial advantage out of it, or it's covering up for something else. Is that kind of would people agree with that? You know, if you heard the word greenwashing, would you? It's a bit like brainwashing, isn't it? But with greenness.
Weirdly, I think greenwashing is probably one of the ones that a lot of people really understand and are slightly on the lookout for. We're all a bit cynical, and we're all like, if the minute something tells me it's super green or super good for the environment or super, I immediately narrow my eyes and look for the lie. But so the greenwashing is really in my business. So I grow cut flowers for sale, and some of my colleagues published a paper this morning exactly about that, about accountability in the cut flower supply chain, and the cut flower market is absolutely just drowning in greenwashing, and it is a really valuable. If you are growing, if you buy flowers from a florist or from a market or wherever you buy flowers, ask as many questions as you can, because even if the person you're asking the question, they're just a nice person, they're selling flowers, and they don't necessarily know all the answers to all the questions. But the more that we ask, the more we put people on the spot, the more the person selling the flowers thinks, oh my goodness, I better find out a bit about that. And then they educate themselves a bit, and then they're asking difficult questions of their supplier, who's then asking difficult questions of their supplier, and suddenly, that way, slowly, we do get a more sustainable approach to the cut flowers that we can buy. I mean, obviously the best thing to do is buy your cut flowers from your neighbourhood flower farmer, but that's not always very convenient, and so I appreciate that. But ask questions, be wary.
Yeah, let's take it on from that, because it links into the second part of our discussion, which is about how we demystify planet-friendly gardening. How do we make it accessible to everyone? I mean, a lot of this festival is about that, isn't it? So I'm going to come over to Sally. How do we make it more accessible? If we start talking in jargon the whole time, that sort of potentially alienates people, doesn't it?
I think it's through example. I also like to see more community gardens and things applying those principles. I would just shout out about Yeovil Town Centre the other day, and I was wandering through, and they have amazing containers. and it's a way of bringing plants to the community in an easy way. And they were giving information as well about the plants that they were using and their pollinator benefit. And I found that was a very easy, accessible way for people to walk past on the high street, go, oh, that's a really nice plant. Oh, and it's called so-and-so, and it's really good for such and such. And that was a really easy way. And it's the same way as Edible Bristol and other ways like that, that you can see it in your communities, on the street. You don't have to read about it. You see it for real life. And that brings it home that you can do that too.
Thanks, Sally. What about you, Kate?
I mean, I think, having quite a small and relatable urban garden makes what I do quite accessible just in itself, and then writing about it, in a sort of accessible way as well. And I think the thing that I sort of tend to do is I write a lot of stories about what I'm doing, and I write about the. Sounds ridiculous actually saying this out loud, but all of the species that use my garden, they're characters. Yeah. I've got my hedgehog called Houdini, I've got my seagulls, I've got my frogs, and so they're all characters in this big sort of story of the garden, and then I write about the garden in a way that I hope is manageable and accessible, and it sort of brings that subject to life in a way that's not. I hope it's not preachy, and it's just a story. It's just a story. And yeah, I'm not describing this very well, am I?
I'm going to have that nice image
I write
of your
about
garden
it,
from now on, Kate. It's like a little family.
This is my family. I hang out with my hedgehogs.
But people do get. I mean, that's that thing about getting people engaged in their gardens, and once they get engaged in their gardens, they immerse themselves in it, don't they? I mean,
we do a thing. I think we all are incredibly influential. Everybody in here has an enormous amount of influence. You influence the people immediately around you, and then they influence the people immediately around them, and literally the ripple effect of the way you hold yourself every day, the way you greet people, the way you do carry out your life. The ripple effect of that is absolutely enormous, and I think it's really worth acknowledging that and then looking at how we can use that usefully. So in tiny ways. So for example, we do a village plant sale in May. It's a very nice, traditional Wincanton Village Hall, second Saturday of May. We've always done a village plant sale to raise money for little local charities. And then I was very inspired by a lady called Sarah Rivett-Carnac, who has set up a charity in memory of her husband, and they are raising money for tiny gardening charities. And there are tiny gardening charities doing incredible work all over the place. And they have no PR, no marketing. They just do this extraordinary work, and they provide places where people who really need to be outside and really need to get their hands in the soil and don't have that facility at home can go and do it. So I thought, well, I know, we do our plant sale, but not everybody can come to our plant sale. We're just Charlton Musgrove. That's a tiny little village plant sale. So what I do is I talk on my social media, and I encourage everybody I talk to have a little plant sale themselves on the second Saturday in May. And the point is not to raise huge amounts of money. And there is no marketing. It's just you have a plant sale next May, the second Saturday in May. Everybody here have a little tiny plant sale next Saturday, second Saturday in May. And you sell your plants for not very much. And there will be a sense of community, a sense of a joint activity that keeps you all busy through the winter, because you're digging up and putting your gardens to bed, and you're splitting your perennials, and you're potting things up. And it's a thing you talk about in the village pub, or it's something you talk about when you bump into each other in the shop, or you go to church, you're like, oh, have you got any of that? Oh, are you doing some of those? Yes, can I have those? Yes, put them in the plant sale. And then imagine this May, I think there were 200 tiny little plant sales all around the world, because that's how brilliant social media is. All around the world, there were 200 tiny little plant sales, and they were raising like 200 quid, nothing, tiny little amounts of money for their tiny little local charities, their gardening charities. And I feel as though I can die now because that's a grip. And so if all of you take that and you use your good energy and you go, I'm going to go and have a little plant sale. Let's have a little plant sale. You do it in your garden. You do it at the end of you do it by your garden gate. It doesn't matter how much you raise. It gets people talking to each other. And people love plants. Yeah. They love tiny plants. And if you sell a little tiny plant to somebody and they take it home and it's the first time they've planted something in their whole life and they've put it in a pot and it's by their front door and that's all they've got and it changes their life, you've done a good thing.
Georgie, I'm going to just, because going back to the question, I think we understand how we can demystify planet-friendly gardening, and we've started to touch on accessibility for everybody, but not everybody lives in a place which is easily accessible. And you think of urban environments, how can we make our urban spaces more accessible, Sally, to everyone? I mean, you were talking about community gardening, but what other things?
I mean, I quite like the idea of front gardens being a little bit more nature-friendly in an urban environment, because if you can get a whole road, and I've seen some of these roads where everybody's front garden is looking wonderful, then if they can all make their front gardens more permeable by taking up some of the paving slabs and planting some pollinator flowers and a bit of clover lawn or something like that, and everybody can see it as they walk past.
We've got... sorry, forget I've got my microphone here. Kate, we've got urban spaces which are just vacant, empty spaces, haven't we? So how can we, as communities, help to make those even more accessible? I know there's quite a lot happening already, but any ideas, any suggestions?
I mean, a lot of those spaces actually, I always come at things from a sort of wildlife biodiversity point of view. So a lot of these spaces that we think are really neglected are actually really good for wildlife. So I'm always a little bit cautious about going in and sort of, clearing everything away and planting it up. But I also recognise that this is really good for community. It's really good for community spirit. So I think, one of the things I've done is, I set up a local hedgehog group to help the hedgehogs in my area, but to also engage people to A, know that there were hedgehogs in the area, and B, sort their gardens out so that they would be more hedgehog friendly. But you can set up any group. We've got Facebook, we've got WhatsApp groups, especially since COVID, and it's a similar sort of thing to what Georgie was saying. You can encourage people to do stuff. So these spaces, that maybe people could garden, I think you can apply to the council and get permission to do stuff. But even if those spaces aren't there, there's still stuff you can do in the community. If I've got plants that I'm dividing and whatever, and I haven't got, I just chuck them out in the front and I put on the local Facebook group, there's some plants and come and get them. There's other people in my area, and it's so cute. They get chalk every year. When the swifts come back, they just write, "Swifts are back" in the road. And it just gets people engaged, and we can all do stuff like that. And there'll always be people who don't know what you're talking about, but there will also be other people who get really excited by that. And that excitement is really infectious, and that will get people doing stuff in it. And I think that's what makes it accessible.
I'll give you another example of that. I was approached about the possibility of using pavement verges for wildflowers. And having gone through lots of hurdles with councils about dogs and safety and all that kind of stuff, a particular cul-de-sac decided to ignore all the rules and regulations, and they decided to plant wildflowers in their verges. And there were people on that. It was a little cul-de-sac, a bit like Neighbours, I think. It was a little cul-de-sac, and people had never spoken to each other before. And as soon as they started getting involved in this little project, the whole thing changed. Everybody got stuck in. Everybody was protecting it. Everybody was looking after it. And it's a wonderful example of how it binds social communities together when you get involved in these kind of projects.
But it's also that thing where if you start doing something publicly, often people will join in. So, you get stories of rows of houses, and they've got backyards, and then there's a kind of a narrow snicket going down behind the houses, and somebody will just put some pots of something in the snicket. And somebody else goes, "Oh, that's really attractive. That looks very nice." So they put some outside their house. And then somebody puts something outside their house. I think the skill is, the way to get people to do things is to do things oneself. Have a go, a little thing. And you may feel like, oh, it's making no difference at all, and nobody's paying any attention, nobody's joining in, and 5 years may go past. But you never know. It's year 6, somebody joins in. Gardening is you don't garden, you don't build a garden for you, and you don't plant, you don't plant a tree for you. You plant a tree for people 2 generations on. And so you can't expect any of this stuff to just happen. But if you just get on with it and do your thing, then somebody else may be inspired to join in and carry on.
I'm conscious of the fact our time, someone's looking at me. You keep us under control well, don't you, Kath? So we've got another 15 minutes, so we've got an opportunity to throw it open to you guys to start asking us questions. And we've got a roving mic, and we've got a first hand up over there.
So my question or request really is on the back of Sally's comment about the 2nd of May. Can we just see how many people are going to actually set up a little stall outside their house or in their village to sell plants?
That's amazing.
I think that's a pretty poor response. I'll just reiterate what I'm asking for. Sally made a very good point, and it's a very simple thing, which I think all of us could make a difference on. So, sorry, Georgie. So how many people on the 2nd of May next year are going to sell some plants?
Second Saturday of May.
Second Saturday, sorry, of next May. OK, thank you.
Thank you for that. Probably more now than there was before, which would be great. Next one, over there.
Hello. Much as I love sitting or wandering around dreamy gardens and watching dreamy gardens on TV that are often huge and have gardeners, I'm not mocking gardeners because I am one as well, but I don't know, Kathy's still involved with Garden as well, for example, but I think there's a real need for education for people who have very small gardens, which is increasing more and more these days, and also gardeners, or would-be gardeners. My son and his wife have bought a house in Cambridge, and they've got a small garden, which I'm itching to, and we are going to help them with it. But they are very time poor because they're working the whole time, and then when they're not working, they're renovating the house. So it's like giving them somewhere to start, but also that sort of guidance for gardening on a small scale. I know years ago, Gay Search did a really good series. I don't know if that was on Gardener's World, about front gardens, which I watched and did my little front garden in our first terrace house. So that would be a request, really, to make it more sustainable. So that I think a lot of people think that gardening's only for people with loads of money and big gardens and big houses.
Well, Kate's a case in point. Yeah. You've got a small garden, haven't you, Kate?
Yeah, I think the tide's turning now. I think, a lot of the stuff we see on TV is people with, like, huge gardens and, loads of acreage. But actually, I think particularly with Gardener's World, and particularly since COVID, we've had all those wonderful videos on Gardener's World of, the home videos that people have been producing, where people are just at home with their small gardens doing small things, which is just been so enlightening and joy, inspiring. And yeah, I think, all of these things, I think it is really important for there to be small, relatable gardens, both on the telly and in other sort of forms of media, but also just doing anything. I mean, most of us just started gardening, didn't we? And we made loads of mistakes, and then we learned by those mistakes, but we carried on because we fell in love. And I think actually just trying to get people, I mean, it's probably easy for your son because he's got you as a mum, but there's loads of people who don't have that. And I would just say, just try it. Just go out and just give it a go.
Part of the joy is making mistakes.
Absolutely. But it's that thing of starting. How do you start? And loads of people are sort of scared to do that. But I think,
I think what you do is... I'm very inspired by Kate. And so what I love about your garden, if you think about the shape of it, so it's a long, relatively narrow suburban garden. And what's bang in the middle of it? It's a pond. Okay, so anybody with a really small garden, the first thing you do, if you put any kind of you either dig a pond or you put a washing up bowl full of water in the middle, you've made a focal point, haven't you? You've made a start.
I have to
then
say that the pond in the middle of the garden is actually quite annoying.
Well, I immediately go, well, look, you've made a focal point. You can then design round it. But also, I now say to people, I didn't used to say this, but I think if you're going to have a cut flower patch, have a pond in the middle of it, because all the people you need to eat your slugs are going to be living in or around that pond. So by building the pond first, you've got your predators to keep your cut flower patch clean. So you've got a lovely design feature in the middle, and you don't need a garden bigger. You could have a pond in the middle of this stage.
And compost heaps is a feature as well. I mean, put compost heaps in the centre of the garden. It's the heart of the garden.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make it beautiful.
And plant some comfrey behind it, and then it's really attractive, and all the bees come.
Yeah.
I wonder whether part of that question you were getting at was how TV and things caters for bigger gardens, and you don't necessarily have, if you're looking for advice about how to do it, the best thing is to buy Kate's book, really, probably. If you probably already have. That's another...
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you. I'll give you a tenner later.
I'm going to be rich by the end of the day.
Nigel, can we just
Shall we take someone over on this side? Is there anyone on this side?
Can we
Sally,
just say
sorry.
that even if you have a small garden, when we come back to ideas of planet-friendly, we might want to think about water and harvesting water and slowing the flow of water. Even in the smallest of spaces in our urban areas, we can all do something valuable in that way. So if you've got a new garden, save the water, reduce your water bills, and cut back on, obviously, all the pesticides and things. It's not just putting out wildlife-friendly features, it's also about preserving our resources.
No pesticides.
No pesticides.
Definitely no pesticides. Isn't that right, Sarah? They are persona non grata in this space. On this side, who have we got? Anybody who wants a question on that side? Or have we answered everything? Who else have we got? I can't see any hands. There's a hand up the front here.
So when you're doing wildflower gardens, it's often referred to as using poor soil. Can you explain the definition of poor soil, please?
Would you like me to repeat that? So what's the definition of poor soil when we're talking about wildflower gardens?
Okay, we can all do it. So wildflowers tend to thrive in poor soils. So that's our British native wildflowers, our perennial wildflowers. And so a lot of meadows, a lot of our traditional meadows, we find them on sort of unimproved grasslands. So chalk meadows and stuff like that, we've got a very thin layer of topsoil. And so in order to recreate these meadows in our gardens, it was originally promoted that we should remove a layer of topsoil, which is very rich, and then sow directly into the subsoil, which is much less nutrient dense, which means that the grass would grow much less vigorously, which would give the wildflowers a chance to thrive. So that's the theory behind growing wildflowers. It's not actually recommended that we do that anymore because it's really damaging to remove the top layer of topsoil, and actually we should just be growing stuff that suits the habitat that we've got, the soil that we've got. But you can also help reduce nutrient density of the soil by removing the flowers and the grass every year and taking the thatch off and composting it elsewhere, and then gradually over time you're going to reduce the nutrient value.
We've got time for a couple more questions, I think. Sorry.
Can I just say, sorry, if you want to make a wildflower meadow out of any area of grassland that you want to do, so my husband this is his obsessive compulsion, and so what he does is he mows it really late, so he mows kind of August time, and he'll mow once and then leave the mowings on the ground. He then tosses what he's mown so that any seeds shake down onto the ground. He then takes everything, even if your ground is apparently flat, it's not. There will be a downhill. So take your mowings downhill, even if it's like tiny bit, so that the goodness doesn't leach back into the soil. And then if you want to, order wildflower seed from a really, really reputable wildflower people like Habitat Aid or Emmelsgate or someone like that. and then wait until it's forecast to rain in the late summer. And then you mow, so you pretty much scalp the ground, so you can see the earth. You take everything away, but you do not take the top layer of soil off, because in there you may find, in that top layer of soil, we had orchids, we had adder's tongue fern, we had all kinds of people, and if we had taken that top layer of soil, we would have taken them away from where they've been forever. And then sow your seed just as it's going to rain. So if you're going to sow something like yellow rattle to predate upon the grass, which means that the grass doesn't grow so strongly so that the wildflowers can get their heads above the grass, just wait until it's going to rain in the early autumn and then go for your life. And if you are growing perennial wildflower plants, like, for example, devil-bit scabious or field scabious or all kinds of different kinds of knapweed, all of those things, those you can grow in a seed tray, prick them out as if you're growing plants for anywhere in your garden. So grow them, prick them out, and have them ready to plant into the sward in the spring. And when you plant them into the sward, cover them up, because otherwise they'll get eaten off, because they smell interesting. So all the rabbits and the pheasants and all those other people will come and dig them up, because suddenly it's something new in the sward. So what Fabrizio does is he puts upside down hanging basket frames over anything he wants to protect in the new meadow. And equally, if you ever spot orchids, you may find that you've got orchids and they're just sitting there waiting for the right occasion. And we now have 7 different kinds of orchids at Common Farm, which we did not have when we moved there. And they've just come through that tiny layer of soil. They've fought their way back. So it's really a fun niche, but really fun thing to do. You can do it on a lawn. You can do it on a lawn. You don't know what's in that top layer of soil. And if you end up... The thing that my husband gets more excited about than anything is a thing called an adder's tongue fern, which is it's this big, and it's kind of, as old as the dinosaurs. I don't know anything, but anyway, he's very excited about that.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Thank you.
At the back, over at the back there. We got a microphone over there?
Shout. Oh.
Yeah, no, it's better because then everybody can hear.
Where am I going?
Right at the back there.
Hello.
Hello.
I have listened to some really good stuff this weekend, but a lot of it doesn't apply to where I live and the way I live. I live in a 100-year-old terraced house in what was a mining community, and if I put little plants out for free at the front, they'll get chucked into the road. The only way I can give things away is be in the garden at the same time. And I spend a lot of time in my front garden, because again, I've got a tiny little garden. It's about 40 foot by 10 foot at the back and 30 foot by 8 foot at the front. But my garden's so small, I've moved all those, I've got 3 of those horrible plastic compost heap bins in the front. And the plan is, my grandchildren tell me this, one's going to get turned into a castle. Got to paint it and make some castellations. One's going to be a lighthouse. I'm not sure how we're going to paint that one. And I think the third one was, it's going to be a Dalek. But that hasn't happened yet, because I haven't had the time. And I think this is the key to all this we've talked about, I've listened to this so far, is time. New houses are sold with small gardens because they're low maintenance, maintenance-free. And give an example of that. I went away on holiday. Well, I only went for a weekend about 3 years ago, and I came home to find my neighbour had paved and what's that wooden stuff called? Decking, all of their back garden. And they live next door to a cultivated jungle of edible things. But I had no influence over my neighbours. They can help themselves to anything out of my garden. There's a glut of everything at the moment, but they don't want to. They just want a garden that they can hoover or sweep.
I mean, there are lots of challenges, and I can understand that challenge. It's difficult to answer that in any particular way because, we've got so many different people here in so many different situations. But I would go back to the one thing that we all talked about community engagement. And if you get a community engaged, you'll sometimes find that some of the things like, things being stolen from front gardens and things will disappear because people look out for each other. So that's a possibility. I'm conscious of the fact that we are out of time. Much as I know all of us would love to carry on for another hour, and probably you would all want to go and have a cup of tea, actually, probably. But thank you for coming in for this, our final Hive show today.
As the woman that made all of Kate Bradbury's films with her for Gardens Well, I just think she might well have Do you have a thought?
Yes.
I thought so. Go on.
Very, very briefly.
Yeah.
I think, you're right. We do all have lots of challenges, and I also live in a very urban area. I'm lucky that my Dalek compost bin wouldn't be stolen, or all my plants out the front. But you do get those challenges, and I think. What Nigel was saying was right. All of the community stuff that we do, building communities, getting to know people, chatting to your neighbours, it all helps. It all adds up. So keep trying and good luck.
We had a question yesterday, actually, which was about how can we get more engagement how can we help other people? And I used the example of Kate's garden, which the back is 5 by 13 paces, 5 paces across and 13 long, and the front is...
You couldn't park a car in it.
You couldn't park a car in it. So it's sort of there-ish, I suppose. Sorry?
It's the world's smallest meadow.
It's the world's... do you want to just say what happened as you started your front? Because Kate and I would make films every couple of weeks, months. And what happened to the rest of the row?
What happened to the rest of the row? So people would stop. Every time I was in the front garden, people would stop and they'd come and chat. And they'd often stop when we were filming, which was really annoying. But what happened was my next-door neighbours made a little world's smallest meadow, and then my next-door neighbour, one along, made another tiny meadow. And so suddenly all of these little front gardens were sort of popping up. And what's happened now since I've done my hedgehog route is that lots of people are helping hedgehogs. And so, a neighbour bought me a hedgehog the other day that had been run over, which was a really nice way to start my day. But, we've got a community going on now. We've got a community of people looking after hedgehogs. We've got a community of people growing wildflowers. Another neighbour came to me and said, I've got this little strip of land. I don't know who it belongs to. It's not mine. It's not the council's. But should we grow wildflowers on it? There's a community of us, all of the dog walkers. We go and fill up the hedgehog bowls in the park. So that in the summer where we've just had a really, really dry summer, and hedgehogs were literally coming out in the day saying, I'm so thirsty, I'm just going to lick some dry grass. Sorry, I've got videos of hedgehogs licking dry grass to try and get some moisture out of them. We all got together and we filled up those bowls of water for the hedgehogs. So it is amazing, actually, how much communities can come together. And just by, what Georgie was saying earlier, if you do it, it might take a while, other people will just follow on suit. Because it's the right thing to do, it's the best thing to do, and it makes you feel good.
We really do.
I was just going to say, we've been talking about flowers, but edibles are just as important, and you can grow kilos of edibles in your front garden. I know if you read Vertical Veg book, 70 kilos of vegetables can be grown in a front garden and on a balcony, and they attract just as many insects if you put herbs and other flowers around your main edible. So front spaces can actually be incredibly productive as well as biodiverse.
And effortlessly, Sally has just done the most gorgeous little, we'd call it a segue in the trade, because tomorrow Jason Williams made the film with him actually as well, which was particularly gorgeous. So he's known as the Cloud Gardener. Do you remember? And he's on a 17th floor of a tower block in Manchester, and he was putting YouTube videos on up about his COVID journey. I hate that word. I'm sorry. Of growing things on a balcony 17 floors up in Manchester, and I went and made the film with him. which was just the most gorgeous thing. And he's now doing Chelsea Gardens and all sorts. And he's here tomorrow. So for anybody who is here, in terms of that very small space, and he's doing amazing things with communities. And his latest garden, I think, was it Hampton? Went back and he's put it into, the Generals of Manchester and that sort of thing in the back. Anyway, so lots more tomorrow. But thank you. In the meantime, thank you very much. Kate and Georgie are doing book signing in the bookworm. We hope we've still got, there's more time. You've got time to eat more cake, you've got time to more plants, you've got time to borrow them, you've got time to talk to each other, get more inspiration. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the panel.